In the next few minutes, you will discover a truth that Freud tried to hide even from himself. A truth so disturbing that his followers erased it from books, burned it in archives, and pretended it never existed. If you know this, nothing will ever be the same. Neither the way you see women, nor the way you see yourself. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear changes everything about desire, attraction, and power. If themes like psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. The year was 1895. In turn of the century, Vienna, a woman from the elite named Anna von Lieben entered Freud's office. She not only suffered from inexplicable seizures and paralysis, but carried an anguish that seemed to spring from an invisible abyss inside her. Freud then, a young neurologist, realized that this was not a simple case of hysteria, but something deeper, something that defied all the conventions of medicine and morality of his time. Anna hated her husband, but could not leave him. She felt imprisoned in her own home, but could not name what kept her captive. Every attempt to describe her feelings seemed insufficient. Every word fell into a void of incomprehension. Freud, with his obsession with exploring the unconscious, saw there not only a personal suffering, but a psychological enigma that could reveal secrets about the female psyche that no one dared to face. When investigating Anna's dreams and free associations, Freud began to notice patterns that disturbed even his own scientific mind. Anna did not merely desire freedom or comfort. Her unconscious seemed inclined towards something that society would consider scandalous. Fantasies of domination, humiliation, and submission appeared in her. Narratives so vividly that Freud felt he had touched a primitive and archaic core of the female mind, something that transcends any moral or rational explanation. Freud began documenting every detail. He realized that Anna was not alone in her complexity. What he found in his patients seemed to belong to a broader pattern. The female psyche, in its deepest essence, carried desires that the woman herself often did not recognize or admit to herself. There was a primitive force, a hunger for intensity and risk that hid behind social masks elegantly trained for civility. This perception led Freud to one of the most disconcerting discoveries of his career. The female desire was not simply passive or contemplative. It manifests itself in tension, in contrast, and oscillation between fear and excitement. Freud understood that Anna's mind functioned as a battlefield where opposing forces, submission and resistance, fear and pleasure, denial and attraction, intertwined in a complex and unpredictable way. He wrote in a personal letter that the civilized woman is a mask. Behind this educated and elegant surface lived an archaic creature, hungry and raw. Freud was not exaggerating. He was describing a clinical phenomenon, something that could be observed, measured, and recorded. This duality between appearance and real desire became a key to understanding not only individual cases, but an entire layer of the female psyche that remained invisible to society. Anna's case also revealed that female desire often finds realization in tension and conflict, and not in harmony or consensus. Freud realized that this instinctive force did not obey social norms, nor the rules of what was considered moral or acceptable. What a woman may verbally reject or censor her body, an unconscious mind may simultaneously long for and intensely desire. This dissonance would become the cornerstone of his theory about female desire. Freud, with all caution and scientific rigor, realized that modern civility, with its rules of behavior, its expectations of morality, and its ideals of equality, would never be ready to accept these discoveries. It was a truth too disturbing, capable of shaking the foundations of how men and women relate, of how love, attraction, and sexuality were understood. That is why this vision was largely erased, ignored, or reinterpreted by those who came after him. But even in the face of censorship, Freud continued to write, reflect, and try to understand Anna's psyche. He realized that the key to understanding female desire was not in the words, The woman said, but in subtle signs, in dreams and silences, and in reactions that escaped consciousness. It was a hidden code buried in the unconscious that required courage to be read and interpreted, something Freud knew many would not have. The case of Anna von Lieben marked the beginning of an exploration that Freud would never fully disclose. It was the first glimpse of a universe of forbidden desires, of archaic tensions and paradoxes that run through human history. The woman Freud could not explain revealed not only the complexity of female desire, but also the risk of confronting truths that society and morality tried to bury. And it is exactly at this intersection between the civilized mask and the primitive instinct that this video dives unveiling Freud's forbidden theory about female desire. Dora and the secret of female desire. The erotization of refusal. The case of Dora, recorded by Freud. Shortly after Anna von Lieben's deepened even more the understanding of the female unconscious. Dora was an 18-year-old young woman, elegant, intelligent, but marked by a constant tension between attraction and repulsion. She accused her father's friend of harassment, but what Freud noticed in his clinical diary notes was disturbing. Her reaction was not only horror or fear. There was something more complex, more instinctive, a latent excitement that contradicted the conscious narrative she told the world. Freud described a phenomenon he would later call the erotization of refusal. The more inaccessible the object of desire became, the more intense the attraction. Dora did not want rationally, but her body and unconscious mind reacted strongly. Freud understood that this was not an isolated case. It was a repetitive pattern in female desire. The tension, the withdrawal, and the unpredictability of the other created an energy that paradoxically fueled fascination and excitement, while the female consciousness tried to deny or rationalize what it felt. This discovery challenged all the rules of morality and the social codes of the time. What society called respect, education, and decorum had no power over the archaic instinct of the mind. Female desire did not follow the logic of reason or emotional justice. It responded to the intensity of risk, to the presence of power, and to the experience of the unknown. It was a dance between closeness and withdrawal, between security and danger, where control was not in the hands of consciousness, but in the deep flow of the unconscious. The concept of erotization of refusal also explains why historically female figures of great power or influence, such as Cleopatra, conquered hearts and empires through mystery and inaccessibility. Unattainable women muses and queens always attracted fascination precisely because they created tension and momentary inequality. Freud saw this pattern not as perversion, but as an instinctive manifestation of desire, a primordial force that transcends civility, fashion, or social convention. Modern psychology and later sexology studies confirmed what Freud observed in Dora. Alfred Kinsey decades later measured women's physiological responses to various stimuli and discovered that situations their consciousness condemned often provoked intense excitement. The female mind and body operated on distinct layers. While the conscious said no, the unconscious responded with yes. Freud had realized pioneeringly that female desire thrives on contrast and tension, and not on complacency or predictability. The effect of refusal also explains modern behaviors that many try to rationalize or moralize. Why do so many women reject kind, available, and predictable men only to feel attracted to those who offer resistance, mystery, or even coldness? Freud pointed out that this is not dysfunction nor conscious choice. It is a deeply rooted biological and psychological mechanism. The female mind seeks intensity, challenge, and risk, and excitement is born precisely from the game of approach and withdrawal. Dora then became the symbol of an enigma Freud never dared to simplify. The young woman was not difficult or perverse. She was human, crossed by unconscious forces that defy reason and morality. By studying her behaviors, Freud not only revealed the paradox of female desire, but also pointed to a universal truth: attraction is not guided by pure kindness or goodness, but by tension, contrast, and implicit power. And it is exactly this tension that Freud considered too dangerous to be disclosed without caution. To reveal that female desire thrives on inequality, risk, and refusal was to challenge cultural narratives of civility, equality, and morality. But understanding Dora is fundamental to understanding the female psyche completely, not as a mystery to be superficially deciphered, but as a hidden code that pulses beneath layers of rationality, socialization, and convention, and that remains active, alive in the 21st century. Modern society, with its obsession with equality, morality, and politically correct social norms, has built a narrative that completely ignores the primitive patterns of desire. Men are taught to be kind, sensitive, always available to constantly please, and to control their instinctive impulses. The problem is that in the female unconscious, absolute predictability and lack of tension are interpreted as disinterest, weakness, or lack of power. The man who tries to strictly follow the rules of civility often distances himself from what really arouses fascination. Freud had already anticipated this conflict. He understood that civility, in trying to domesticate human instincts, would end up emotionally punishing those who followed it. The man educated to be predictable and morally perfect often becomes invisible to female desire. He offers security, stability, and affection. Everything that consciousness says is desirable, but cannot activate the primordial energy that arouses fascination. It is a cruel paradox. The more he molds himself to rational expectation, the more he distances himself from instinctive power. This disconnection between morality and desire generates what Freud called the Thanos effect, the attraction to what destroys, to what is forbidden, to what challenges. The female mind does not react to pure kindness or predictability. It responds to intensity, presence, risk, and unpredictability. Thus, men who are too emotionally available, even if loyal, dedicated, and caring, are often ignored, while figures who manifest strength, mystery, or detachment arouse instant fascination. The psychological impact on men is devastating. Many live in a constant contradiction. They try to be what they believe the woman wants, repress their strength and boldness, and yet are rejected. Frustration grows as they realize that following rules, pleasing, and showing vulnerability does not guarantee effective success. Freud warned that this process was a form of emotional castration of masculinity, slow, almost imperceptible, but deeply rooted in the social structure. What modern civilization ignores is that desire does not align with discourses on equality or emotional parity. The female brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution, still responds to hierarchies, intensity, and risk. Modern studies confirm this. Excitement and fascination often arise in the presence of power, silent authority, or unpredictability, and not in the face of predictability or absolute kindness. Biology, therefore, contradicts what culture teaches. Freud realized that the game of desire is invisible, undeclared, and that men are trained from an early age to ignore this reality. They learn that vulnerability and sensitivity are virtues, but they do not learn the presence, firmness, and silent energy are the true catalyst of female desire. This lack of understanding generates emotional confusion, feelings of inadequacy, and often the sense that being right, or doing everything right, is not enough. The modern paradox is cruel. The man who molds himself to the woman's explicit desire loses what attracts her unconsciously. By becoming predictable and emotionally malleable, he erases the mystery, the intensity, and the energy that arouse fascination. It is an invisible cycle of frustration where morality, civility, and conscious desire collide with ancestral forces that govern attraction and excitement. Understanding these laws of desire is not manipulation, but awareness. The man who understands the tension between what the woman says she wants and what her unconscious body really desires finds a position of inner power. He stops chasing, he stops begging for approval, and begins to attract naturally, because he no longer depends on external recognition. Firm presence, strategic unpredictability, and silent intensity become the fundamental elements to awaken fascination, aligning with the deep truths that Freud discovered. The paradox of the gentle man is one of the most painful manifestations of ignorance about female desire. He does everything right, demonstrates attention, respect, care, remembers important dates, listens, supports. In theory, he is the ideal partner, the man every woman should love. However, in practice, he is often rejected. What Freud and later scholars pointed out is that fascination does not arise from kindness, but from tension, unpredictability, and energetic presence. Absolute predictability eliminates mystery, and desire needs precisely the unknown, risk, and intensity. This perception is corroborated by modern neuroscience. Recent studies of the female brain show that stimuli from emotionally firm, confident, and even distant men provoke intense activations in the brain's reward centers, while gentle, predictable, and always available men generate almost neutral neural responses. Pleasure, therefore, does not come from affection or predictability, but from magnetic presence, unresolved tension, the sensation that something powerful yet inaccessible is there. The female body reacts before consciousness. Pupils dilate, heart rate increases, skin responds, even if the woman rationally denies attraction. Freud noticed this in Dora's accounts. Kinsey confirmed it with physiological measurements. And modern studies continue to reveal the same pattern the rational mind lies to itself. While the body responds to primitive instinct, energy, risk, and implicit power, female desire is a blind, impersonal, and ancestral force that does not align with conscious or moral discourses. The gentleman often does not understand this mechanism. He believes that pleasing is enough, that showing vulnerability and care guarantees affection. However, by fully aligning his actions with the woman's conscious expectations, he becomes predictable and overly predictable. Predictability kills mystery, and desire needs scarcity, contrast, and tension to flourish. The man who offers everything without restriction inadvertently devalues himself, since desire feeds precisely on absence and challenge. Freud, more than 1 century ago, pointed out that female desire thrives on the contrast between presence and absence, between strength and refusal, between risk and security. Modern civilization, with its focus on morality, equality, and control, ignores this primitive truth. Men who try to be morally correct ideals lose touch with the energy that activates fascination. It is a cruel paradox. The gentler they are, the more invisible they become. The more mysterious and firm they are, the more desirable. Neuroscience reinforces the concept of the hedonic paradox. Giving too much generates accommodation. Strategically withholding generates fascination. In the female unconscious, the calculated absence of a firm man increases attraction, while constant and predictable presence tends to neutralize desire. This effect is not manipulation, it is a biological reflex, an evolutionary programming that selects partners capable of presence, strength, and dominance, even if in a silent way. Men who understand this paradox go through an internal transformation. They stop living to please and begin to exist as presence, energy, and intensity. It is not about disrespecting or hurting, but about aligning their actions with the primitive logic of desire, which responds to tension, not complacency. Silent strength and strategic unpredictability become more powerful than words or superficial gestures. Finally, understanding the paradox of the gentle man reveals one of the deepest truths of psychoanalysis. Female desire is not only rational, conscious, or moral. It is instinctive, ancestral, and irrational. The man who wants to be understood must comprehend that attraction is not conquered with absolute kindness, but with presence, mystery, and non-verbal energy. In this space, fascination flourishes, tension awakens desire, and the female unconscious engages in an intense, legitimate, and irrefutable way, exactly as Freud tried to reveal more than 1 century ago. Within the female unconscious lives a powerful and archaic figure that Freud and Jung called animus, the idealized male archetype. It is not the real man who walks beside the woman, but an internal representation that activates deep fantasies, instinctive desires, and primordial physiological responses. This archetype is what determines who awakens fascination and who remains invisible, regardless of conscious virtues or morality. The animus is the catalyst of desire, the silent judge who decides, often before consciousness realizes, who deserves attention and who does not. The animus is complex, paradoxical, and often contradictory. It does not seek the perfect man of romantic tales, but the unstable hero, the silent warrior, the lone wolf who combines strength, mystery, and a presence that does not bend. This internalized figure awakens fascination because it activates deep archetypal fantasies, connecting the woman to primordial emotions of risk, protection, and intensity. The gentle and predictable man rarely corresponds to this image. He offers comfort, but does not ignite the fire of tension necessary for desire to pulse. This dynamic explains behaviors that at first sight seem irrational. Women may reject emotionally available men and yet feel attraction for figures that represent strength, intensity, or unpredictability. It is not neediness, it is not perversion, it is not conscious choice. It is the activation of the animus in the unconscious, which demands intensity, contrast, and emotional energy. That is why dark romances, distant figures, and even dominant behaviors awaken fascination, while pure kindness does not even provoke reaction. The paradox deepens when we consider the difference between consciousness and body. While the rational mind may rationalize, criticize, or deny attraction, the body responds directly to the archetype. Pupils dilate, the heart races, the skin reacts. The brain releases dopamine, all automatic responses to the presence that activates the animus. Modern neuroscience studies confirm that women may verbalize preferences for stability and sensitivity, while their nervous system responds intensely to men who represent silent strength and unpredictability. Desire does not communicate with words, but with primitive signals. Understanding the animus also reveals why certain relationship patterns repeat throughout history. Unattainable muses of medieval literature, female leaders fascinated by powerful men, and even modern attraction phenomena on social networks reflect this same logic. The archetype does not change, only the form of expression evolves. Female desire continues to be guided by an energy that transcends morality, culture, and social convention, because it is instinctive and biologically coded. Finally, recognizing the influence of the animus allows men to understand the invisible game of desire. He does not need to manipulate or deceive. It is not about being cynical, but about developing presence, firmness, and authenticity that resonate with the archetypal figure internalized in the female mind. Those who understand the animus begin to act with silent energy and intensity, creating fascination effortlessly, becoming a pole of attraction that awakens primordial responses, invisible to consciousness, but impossible to ignore. Female desire does not manifest only by what is offered, but by what is denied. Tension, absence, and risk are essential ingredients that activate deep responses in the unconscious. Freud noticed in his studies that women felt fascination not for comfort, but for intensity, mystery, and challenge that certain male figures represented. Constant and predictable presence kills attraction, while strategic distance, silent firmness, and calculated risk increase fascination almost automatically. This dynamic is deeply rooted in biology. Modern neuroscience studies confirm that stimuli combining control, coldness, and unpredictability provoke intense activations in the pleasure centers of the female brain. The body reacts before the mind, sending signals of excitement and alert that often contradict what the woman verbalizes. She may state that she prefers stability and sensitivity, but her physiology responds intensely to the presence that suggests strength, dominance, and unresolved energy elements that the ancients called the magic of mystery. Risk, in turn, intensifies the perception of value. The more challenging and inaccessible a man presents himself, the greater the unconscious attraction he awakens. Calculated absence is a key element of this process. It creates a contrast between closeness and distance, between presence and emptiness, stimulating the primitive instinct of conquest and engagement. It is not manipulation, but alignment with an ancestral logic, a hidden code that regulates the tension between what is possessed and what escapes, between security and excitement that keeps desire alive. Understanding these forces allows a man to become the center of attraction without needing to convince or chase. By cultivating presence, firmness, and silent energy, by creating tension and not giving in to predictability, he awakens fascination naturally. Female desire flourishes exactly in this space between the known and the unknown, between the safe and the risky, between what is offered and what is withheld. And it is in this territory that the power of attraction reveals itself subtle, deep, and irresistible, governed not by conscious logic, but by the hidden impulse Freud dared to explore, and that remains valid to this day. Aligning your energy with female desire is not about manipulation or power games. It is about inner mastery, about recognizing the presence, firmness, and silent unpredictability are more powerful than any explicit demonstration of affection. The man who understands this dynamic does not chase. He radiates energy and authenticity, becoming the central point of attraction without needing to convince, explain, or beg. It is in this alignment that the tension that fuels female desire arises naturally, almost irresistibly. The key lies in the consistency of presence, not in availability. Women internalize signals of strength, control, and emotional stability unconsciously, responding to them with fascination and desire. A man who bends to the expectation of pleasing, who shapes his life to fit into the woman's explicit desire, erases the mystery that the female unconscious seeks. The one who maintains his direction, his principles, and his personal space, even in the face of rejection or emotional pressure, becomes magnetic, a living archetype that activates deep and primordial responses. Another essential point is the management of absence and contrast. Being present without being predictable, offering attention without becoming predictable, creating moments of closeness and carefully calibrated withdrawal. This awakens fascination because it activates the psychology of risk and scarcity. It is not about cruelty or disrespect, but about respecting the logic of desire that Freud described. Attraction is not one with logic or pure kindness, but with energy, tension, and presence that is felt before it is understood. Finally, aligning with the energy of female desire means understanding that the reward is not the woman's approval or affection, but the man's own authenticity and strength. Whoever understands this stops begging for attention and begins to radiate it naturally. The woman ceases to be the center and begins to orbit around something rarer, a man who does not explain himself, who does not seek permission to exist, who simply is, and whose energy awakens unconscious fascination, pulsating tension, and deep desire, exactly as Freud revealed. but that modern society still refuses to accept. The climax of female desire, the power of presence and mystery. The climax of female desire is not born from words, promises, or predictable gestures. It emerges from silence, from firmness, and from the presence that does not bend. Freud realized that what awakens fascination is not constant care or total availability, but the energy of someone who maintains his direction, who does not explain himself, and who reveals himself only subtly. Mystery, unresolved tension, and the ability to create contrast are primordial elements that transform an ordinary man into a magnetic figure. Women do not seek only affection. They seek intensity that challenges, something that provokes deep, instinctive reactions. Each gesture, each calculated withdrawal, each demonstration of silent strength activates ancient circuits in the female brain, awakening excitement and fascination that often not even the woman herself understands. Desire is not rational. It is biological and psychological, and its maximum expression is revealed when the man does not chase, but maintains his center, his integrity, and his energy intact. This dynamic explains why so many men fail even when doing everything right. Being predictable, kind, and available eliminates the contrast that fuels desire. Those who embody presence, direction, and silent mystery activate the archetype of the animus, transforming each interaction into a game of unconscious energy. Female desire flourishes in tension, in uncertainty, and in calculated risk, revealing that true power does not lie in direct control, but in self-sufficiency that commands respect effortlessly. In the end, understanding this logic is understanding the deepest functioning of attraction. It is not about manipulation or forced seduction, but about respecting the structure of desire, of mind and body. The man who masters his energy, who maintains presence and mystery, becomes irresistible not because he pleases, but because he exists as a pole of intensity, activating the female unconscious and revealing the truth that Freud dared to explore. Desire is not conquered with kindness, but with energy, tension, and silent power. The truth Freud never hid. Now that you know what Freud tried to hide, you understand that female desire is not simple. It does not submit to superficial rules, and it is not convinced by logic alone. It is deep, primitive, and unconscious, governed by tensions, contrast, and silent energy. Understanding this completely changes the way you relate not only to women, but to yourself. It is a code that few dare to decipher, and even knowing it, few have the discipline to apply it in their own lives. This understanding is an invitation to the awakening of inner power. By maintaining presence, firmness, and mystery, you stop chasing approval and begin to naturally attract what once seemed unattainable. Female desire flourishes in the face of intensity and authenticity, and it is in this space that you become not only admired, but unforgettable, awakening fascination that transcends words and superficial gestures. True magnetism cannot be explained. It is felt. And now you know how to provoke this energy. Knowledge is dangerous, but action is even more powerful. Do not be content with understanding. Transform. Become the man who does not beg, who maintains his presence and his energy intact, who masters his life before trying to master any relationship. Desire is not conquered with kindness. It is conquered with silent power and authenticity. If you want to continue exploring the deepest secrets of the mind, of desire, and of attraction, subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and do not miss any video, because what you are about to discover will change the way you see yourself and the way the world reacts to your presence. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And if everything you believe about yourself is just a reflection of someone's gaze, click now on one of the videos on the side and start breaking that mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?